Hello, what's up? Today we are going to take a look at how to create this thumbnail carousel that syncs with each other. Take a look at this. What happens here is that the carousel at the top uses another carousel at the bottom as a navigation. So you can see that if I click this arrow, the images at the bottom corresponds to the images at the top. So whichever carousel I choose here automatically syncs with the one at the top. And we have them in different tabs. So this is like different categories, but this is category 1, category 2, category 3. I want to point out that the categories here are not dynamic. They are static Oxygen tabs, but the carousel here are dynamic, pulled in from custom post types and custom fields. I'm going to show you how I set up the custom post type and custom fields. At the WordPress backend, I have a custom post type UI installed, and I also have advanced custom field. Actually, you don't need to use the pro version for this since we are not using any repeaters. So we're going to go to the custom post type UI. The first thing I did was create my post types. So I'm going to view the post types that I have here, and I called my post type slug custom product. I have custom products as the plural and custom products as singular. And if you want to populate this other field, you just click here and it's going to automatically populate this field. Let's go down to the bottom. All these settings, I didn't bother to do anything with it except to choose a dash icon by clicking here, and I chose this, and I supported just 3 fields. So I supported title, custom fields, and page attributes, and then I also supported the custom taxonomies. Now this is not going to show up until you create it. So these custom product categories, I had to create it by add these. When you go to here, add/edit taxonomies, what I did was I added a new taxonomy and I called it custom product category, and of course the plural categories and then the singular category, and I attached this to a post type called custom product, which I created earlier. And after that, let's go down to the bottom, and nothing else. There was no other setting there. The next thing is I went to the custom fields and created custom field. I call it custom product data, and here I have 5 fields. The first one is a title field, which is just a text. So you can see the title. I created a title. The type is text. And the second one is an image field, which is an image field type is image, and I set the return format to image URL. It's very important to do that. The third one is a slogan, which is just a text. The fourth one is the size. That one I used a number, and in that number I appended gram to it. Since the final output will have gram, you could leave that out and add that in Oxygen. Is still possible. And then the last one is nutrient, which is just text. So they're all basically text except the size, which is a number type, Now let's go to the custom product, the post type that I created. And now here you can see the custom product category that I created earlier. I'm going to select that, and in there I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 categories. And in my custom product, I have gone ahead to populate my custom product with the field. So you see the title here, the image, I've added the image, the slogan, I've added the size, I've added here, and the nutrients, I've added the nutrient. And I repeated that for all the products here. And you would notice, let me go back there, you'll notice that I've assigned 2 categories for this. Normally, ideally, this design is supposed to take 1 category for each, but the reason I assigned multiple categories is because I needed to have enough images for these sliders, because you need to have enough images in the category for instance, I set this to display 6, and for it to display, you need to have enough categories, otherwise you're going to have empty spaces in this slider. So that is why I assigned multiple categories to the different products, so that I can have enough image for each category, and so each of them have more than 1 category. So that is basically all. Then once we're done with that, we'll go into Oxygen and then we're going to start. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and add a section, and then I'm going to add a div inside that section, and I'm going to rename that div to tab wrapper. I want to give it an ID of tab wrapper underscore wrapper. I'm going to add the tabs element inside that tab wrapper, and I'll go in and delete all the tabs except one. So I'm deleting the tabs, and also I'm going to delete the tab content because I want to concentrate on just one per time. So I have one tab and one tab content. I'm going to go ahead and just drop a code block because we're going to need a code block. Not necessarily, whatever we want to use the code block for the CSS. You could put this on your style sheet, which is actually a better thing, but for convenience I want to be able to, I don't want to go into the style sheet and come out. So that is why I'm writing here. After you're done with this, it is advisable to move your CSS into the style sheet so that it can be well organized. First, let's select the section and give it a minimum height of 100 VH. Now to see what I'm doing, I'm going to set this this tab wrapper. I'm going to give it just a slight background color so you will see it. We're going to remove that later. I'm going to set the tab wrapper to 100% width, and I want to set the height to 100% height. But if you notice, it's not taking up 100% height. Our section has 100 VH height, so this is supposed to take up the 100%, but it's not taking 100%. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that out, and I'm going to go to the code block. The inner wrapper of the content does not inherit the height of the section by default. Let's remember to turn off this PHP. I'm going to go into the CSS, and I'm going to just paste the CSS that I've already written out. What this does is that it ensures that the city section inner wrap inherits the height of the section. So I've set that to inherit. Now if I go back to this tab wrapper, I'm simply going to set the minimum height inherit, and that fills up because I just wanted to fill up the height of the parent. So I'm going to take off that color. That was just for illustration purpose. I'm going to select the tab wrapper, and I'm going to stack it horizontally, and I'm going to middle center, and that centralizes the content. I'm going to go ahead and select my tabs parent, the parent of the tabs element. Even though we have one tab element here, I want to duplicate it for the purpose of illustration because we're going to have more than one. I have to stack it vertically. I'm going to give it a gap of 3 pixels. And because no explicit width is set for it, I'm going to set the flex shrink to 0. Now this is so that whatever the content, how many content we have here, for instance, if I type blah 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 blah, it's going to still grow up to the extent of the content, but without the flex shrink set to 0. Let's see what happens. I'm going to go there, and I'm going to remove that. So by default, the element's flex shrink is set to 1, which means let it shrink if another element needs more space. But in this case, we're saying no, do not bulge, remain where you are. I'm going to go ahead and set the overflow to hidden, and I'm going to go into the borders and set the border radius to 20 pixel. So that gives us this nice rounded effect, and I want to add box shadow to it. So let's go to advanced effect, box shadow. I'm going to set the color to black and the transparency, let's say maybe 10, 15. And then I want to set this to 1, 1, 2. That will give us a nice subtle box shadow. I'm going to select the tabs, and I'll make sure that the tab class is selected. We have the ID, the class, and the active class. So you want to make sure you select the class. And I'm going to stack it horizontally because I need the content of the tab to be stacked horizontally like this. And then I'm going to set this to middle and space between. I need the background color to be white. And I'm going to go ahead and set the typography color to be light gray. Then I'm going to give it a padding of 1 viewport width, 1 VW, and I'm going to apply that to all. The reason I'm giving it in VW is because I want it to be fluid. Now if you take a look at this, if I shrink the size, you can see that these the paddings, reduces. You can see that it makes way. So that helps in that responsiveness. I'm going to select the tab active class, and then I want to set the background also to white, and I'm going to set the typography color to blue. I think I have a blue color here. So when it's active, the color will change to blue. I'm going to go ahead and add 2 icons into the tab. So I'm going to add icon, and I will just duplicate that, Ctrl D. The first icon, I'm going to give it a class of tab category icon, but the cat is going to be, now I'm going to add a prefix to all my classes because I already have those classes in this install. So I'm going to add a prefix to all the classes I'm going to be using in this tutorial. So that is tab category icon, and the next icon I'm going to give it a class of tab arrow icon. Give it a prefix of 2. I'm going to move this other icon here. I'm going to select the text and just change it to category 1. I'm going to select the tab here and give it a gap of, let's make it 20 pixels. Or let's use rem for that. I think that separates it nicely. I'm going to select this icon, and then I'm going to go ahead and choose, this is the tab category icon. I'll choose the linear icon. I want sun. I'm going to give it a color of this red color, and we need this icon size to be fluid. Normally I would use this size here, but I don't want to use the pixel, and you can't change this. So I'm going to go to the style sheet, and I need this icon size to be fluid only on the desktop. So I have a CSS that I've already written that I've targeted the tab icon. So I'm going to go in here, and then I will add, this is supposed to be -2. So what happens is that it's going to make this, I'm giving it a width and a height of 3.9 viewport width. So that is going to enable it to scale. So you see from this example also, as we move, those icons are reducing in size, enabling the fluid responsive nature of this layout. So I'm going to go out there. Next, I'm going to select this tab arrow icon, and I need to use font awesome icon. I need a chevron. I'm going to choose icon type solid, and the icon color, I'm going to set it to white. I'm going to set the background to light gray. Actually, I want it to be lighter than that. Maybe something like this. I'm going to set the icon size to 12 and space around to 8. Now that's a fairly small icon because of the small space around. So the size 12 is good enough, so we don't need to make it fluid. We need to give this transition because we are going to change the color on the active class. So I'm going to go in and to the effect transition, and I'm going to give it a transition of 0.4 seconds. And then when this class is active, now I think we mistakenly added that padding, the gap, I think, yeah, we added the gap to the active class. I'm going to just take that out. It should have been on the class, so the gap will be 2 rem. We need to be able to change the color of this icon just like this. So when we select the active class, the active tab will have this icon blue. We have to do that with custom CSS. So I'm going to go ahead to the style sheet, and I'm going to add a custom CSS. Now I want to take note of this tab, active tab class. So let's select that tab, the active tab class. I'm just going to copy it and into the custom CSS. So I'm just going to write the active tab arrow icon. So I'm just going to paste that class. Okay, so the active tab class, and then we're going to select a tab arrow icon to give it a background. So if it is active, it's going to have that background. Now because I want these spaces here to have some sort of fluid nature, I'm going to go ahead and remove that gap from that tab class. So let me just take that off. Rather, what I'm going to do is to wrap this with a div. So I'm going to wrap this with a div, and then I'm going to give that div a class of tab title wrapper. Rather, I'm just going to call it sync. Yep, sync tab title wrapper. That is the synchronizing carousel. So let me just give it that. I'm going to go into the padding and give it a left padding of 1 rem and a right padding of 3.3 viewport width. So that way, as it is the viewport is shrinking, this is slowly moving closer to it. So it's just going to gradually, you can see the space between here is going to reduce gradually as we, you see it's moving gradually in just a little bit. So it helps with making it a bit fluid. Now onto the tab content. Let me remove these two unneeded tabs. Now onto the tab content. First thing I'm going to do is to add a padding of 0 all round, and I usually advise for your main tab contents, do not give it a padding inside, put something inside, put a inner div inside it. I'm going to stack it vertically. I'm going to add a div inside it, and then I'm going to give it a class of sync slider wrap, because I'm going to add my prefix. Stack it vertically and align the contents to center, and I want to give it a width of 100%. Go to the padding and give it 2 rem all around, and you can see that it doesn't grow to fill this. I'm just going to go into the layout here and set the flex grow to 1, and it just fills up everything. Of course, that text is supposed to be inside there. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, very important, I also have OxyExtras installed, because that's what we are going to be using here. So OxyExtras installed, and I went ahead to enable the carousel builder, and I have that OxyExtras in here. So I'm going to go to extras, and I'm going to drop in the carousel for the first one. So this is going to be for this first carousel. Now for the carousel settings, I'm going to choose the carousel content for it's going to be a repeater, and for the cells, I'm just going to go ahead and add number of visible cell to 1. I'm going to give the cell height 600 pixel. Let's apply params. Then I'm going to go back to the behavior and interaction, and I'm going to enable wrap round infinite cells. For now, I don't want it to autoplay. You could always set that later if you want, but I don't want it to autoplay. And take note that when you want to set the autoplay, you're only going to set it for the top one. You don't set it for both of them, just the top one, and the down one will automatically, sync. Let's go back to the navigation arrows. I don't want navigation arrows here, so I'm going to set the navigation arrows to none. And let's go back to the page dots. I don't want the page dots, so I'm going to click disable, apply params. Next thing I'm going to do is to add a repeater inside that carousel. I'm going to go to the query. I'll select custom. The post type, I'm going to choose custom product post type, and I want to filter the category, so I want the category to be category 1. I'm going to select the repeater div. I'm going to give it a class of sync contents container with the prefix of 2. I'm going to stack the items horizontally, and I'm going to stack it middle and center, because the reason I'm stacking it horizontally is the cells are going to be stacked horizontally. I'm going to add 2 divs inside the repeater. I'm going to add the first div, and I'm going to duplicate it. For the first div, I think I should be naming this stuff. So this one, I'm just going to call it content container. And then this one, I'm going to give it a class of sync image wrap. That is where we're going to put our image, this image. And then let me just rename that to image wrap. And then this other one, we're going to put content. So for now, let's focus on this first one. I'm going to set the width here to 22%. Now, how did I determine that it's 22%? Because that's just about the size I want it to be, so maybe I make it 20%. So I want it to start at 22%, and that means it's going to be 22% of its container, which is this container. So I need it to be 22% of the container, so that it will always, you see, it always reduces based on the size of the container to keep it responsive. So I'm going to give it a minimum width of 200 pixel. The problem with giving percentage is that at a point it gets just too small. So you want it to get to a point as it's reducing. At a point when it gets to that 200 pixel, it no longer reduces. You can see it stays the same. But from here it reduces and then stops once it reaches 200 pixels. So you don't ever want it to get smaller than that. You could make it, depending, you could adjust this value. I think I would just make this maybe 180, about 190. Let's leave it like that. And then for this, I want it to overlap the div that is going to be next to it, like this. So this is going to be a div. So I want it to overlap it like that. So because of that, I'm going to give it a negative right margin of 12. And also I want that to be in percentage. So it pulls this in. Now we don't have any content there, so it seems like once we get to that, you're going to see that we have we're going to have enough width to still have our content. So I'm going to give it a margin bottom 8 rem. And why am I giving a margin bottom of 8 rem? You can see that I want it to move up a little bit away from the bottom. I don't want it to stay at exactly the center. I need it to move up here. We're going to use this as in a background image. So how do we get the height? To get that height, I'm going to give it an aspect ratio of 1 over 1.3. So that gives it that height. Now I'm going to select the ID, and then I'm going to go to the background. For that background, I want to set dynamic data URL, the image field, and I just want to select the medium large, and that should populate. I'm going to set this cover, no repeat, 50%, 50% top and left. So we have that image there. I'm going to go to effects. Let's select that class. I want to give it a drop shadow, so I'm going to go to box shadow, and then I want to give it black, maybe 13, like that. And I want this to be 27. I want this to be 100 to move down. I want the blur to be like, let's make this 25. And yeah, and the spread, let's just give it a -10. So it gives us that nice drop shadow effect. Onto the second div, I'm going to give it a class of sync content wrap. I'm going to give it a prefix. So I'm going to start it vertically, and then I'm going to align left and middle. For this one, I want the width to be 70%. You can see now it moves 70% of the width, and I'm going to go in and give it a height of 100%. Now let me just add a text here so we can see what is going on here. So you can see where this text is overlapping here, and we need that to move. So I'm going to select this again. Let me change the name of that. What was the class? So content wrap. So I'm going to call it content wrap, and I'm going to go into the padding. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give top 2.4 rem. Let me just apply all for now, and then I can change that. So change that to rem, apply all, and then the bottom will be 2.4 rem. And then the left, I want the left to be this left, I want it to be in percentage, and then I want it to be 16%. So it just shift this all the way. And for the right, I need the right to be about 3.4 rem, so I can have just slightly bigger than the top and the bottom. So I have a text here. I want to take this text and give it a class of sync title. I'll put my prefix there. I'll set the color to white and the font size to 1.4 rem. Now before I continue adding the content, I'm going to add an image. Okay, there's our image. Now this tab content, do we need it? Not quite sure, so I'm going to take that out, that text I mean. So I'm going to select the image, and I'm going to give it a class of sync background. Oh, did I hit a dot there? That's wrong. Sync background image, and I'm going to select the image URL, and I want it to be this. I already have all the shapes and SVGs here, so I'm selecting that. Now I think at this point I need to give my section a color because everything is just white. So I'm going to select that and give it a color of something off white, something like that. Now we are seeing stuff. Okay, let's go back to that image. We want to use this image as the background image, but why are we using an image? The reason I'm using an image is particularly because of the design. This design is just a bit challenging, and I want to use the image background so I will be able to control how much how far it goes to the end, to the age of the parent. Because using a background image, you're kind of limited in how it works. So I'm going to set this image to display absolute, position absolute I mean. That means I have to select this content wrap and set it to position relative. Let's go back to the image. Now this text is no longer showing, so what I will do is I'm going to set this z index to -1. So whatever here is on top here will show through I'm going to save this and take a look at the front end just to be sure that this image is going to show up. Okay, so the image shows up and the text shows up. So already we have a carousel. It's taking shape. You can see that this is not quite okay. So I'm going to select that image and give it a width of 100%. Let me save that and let's see how it looks here. Okay, it's not looking great. We're going to fix that. Now let's go back to the absolute position. Now for this text, it's supposed to be the title, and that title is what we have here. It's the title of the product. I'm going to wrap that with a div, and then I'm going to give that a div, a class of title wrapper. So let me just call it title wrapper. So I'm going to give it a class of sync title wrapper or wrap prefix. I want to stack it vertical, center, middle, and then I want to give it padding of 1 rem for all of them. So I'm going to set the width to auto. I mean, that should be the default value, but let me just set it to auto, and then I want to set the minimum width to 150. No matter what, I do not ever want it to be smaller than 150 pixels. And in the custom CSS, I need this to be square, so I'm going to set the aspect ratio to 1. That ensures that it remains a square. Let's go into the effects, and then I'm going to give a border onto the borders. Rather, I'm going to give it a border radius of 100%. Now I want to let's just reduce this text so that yeah, it doesn't feel like. So that title wrap, for now I want to give it a background color of that red, or rather, let me just select, go to the, that class, background, and I'm going to choose this, and then I'm going to set it to contain, no repeat. I'm going to set this to 50%, and I'm going to set this to 50%. So that that is going to give us this shape inside there, and I want to select this and just quickly insert a data, and that is going to be the title. So that's going to return the title. Now with that div selected, I'm going to take the position to position absolute, and then I want to set the right to 6% and the top to 3%. So that gives us that nice places it at the top right there, just like we have here. Let me just call that BG image, and I'm going to add a text, and this is going to be this category text, and I'm going to give it a class of sync category. What I will do here is to insert a dynamic data. So I'm going to insert a dynamic data, categories and taxonomy, and then I will choose that custom product category that we had here. So you can see custom product category. That is what I'm going to choose. And because in my own case I'm going to have maybe more than one, I'm just going to give it a divider, separator, so when it comes in you can have that. So I have my category 1, category 3. I don't like that separator the way it looks. Let's see the separator. This is really getting in the way, so I'm going to turn it off for now. It's still showing. Can you imagine that? This is not working. It's still showing. Okay, it's really annoying though. So how do I select that? Okay, the separator is supposed to, we're going to give it a space on 2 sides. Okay, so that's separated. And then for that category, let me still select that. I want the size to be 1 rem. I'll go into typography and text transform. I want it to be capitalized, and the margin, I want to give it a margin bottom because we have other things here. So I'm going to just give it a margin bottom. So the margin bottom is going to be just a little, 0.7 rem. I'm going to add another text, and that text is going to be a slogan. This slogan and I'm going to give it a class of sync slogan. The font size is going to be 2.8 rem. So I'm going to give it a margin bottom also, but this one is going to be 2.4 rem. And it's going to be a dynamic data, so I'm going to insert the advanced custom field slogan. So let me rename this to categories. Good practice to rename stuff. I didn't spell that right, but it's okay. And then this will be slogan. So I'm going to add another text, and that is going to be our size, what you have here, and then I'm just going to add another one for the nutrients. So I'm going to add another one. So the first one is the size. Double click that, add dynamic data size, and then the next one show up. The next one is going to be nutrients. Alright, now I'm going to rename this to size. I'm going to rename this to nutrients. Now for the size, I think I would like to write size in front of it. So let me just write size, and that should work nicely. But we didn't have that GM because I forgot to add it. So I'm going to quickly just edit that again. I'm going to add insert dynamic data size, include prepend and append text if configured. So I'm just going to add that. So that is going to bring in that GM. So you can see we have that GM there. I'm going to give it a color of red and a font size of 1.2 rem. And then for the nutrients, I'm just going to give it a color of gray, and I think that font size is okay. So let's save this and let's see the front end, how it looks. Alright, so already it's taking shape. Now these categories are these colors blue, so I think I would like to use Custom Css to take care of that. Now I don't want these categories to be clickable, and I don't want it to have this color. Now we've already given these categories a class of a sync category, so I'm going to go into the Custom Css. Now we want to do two things. So that is let me just comment that we're going to remove pointer event from category and change color. Okay, so I want to change the text color, target that sync category. To target the text, we're going to use the anchor tag inside it, and what I'm going to set the color to. So I've changed that color, and then I want to just say pointer events none, and just collapse that. Now if you want your category to be clickable, so you don't have to do the pointer events none stuff, you can just change the color. And let me just the CSS for our main slider is going to start here, so let me just put that there. Now I'm going to select this sync slider wrap. Let me collapse this carousel. Let me just call it, let me rename this to slider wrap. So it's going to, so we're going to add another carousel. So go to OxyExtras, and we're also going to choose repeater. And for the cell, we're going to set the number of visible cells to 6. And then I'm going to go to the selected cell. Now, if you're using PNG image, you can set a background color. So, well, let me just set this background color, but it might not really matter here. And I'm going to set the selected scale. So when it's selected, so anyone that is selected is going to grow just a little bit, you know, bigger than the others. So I'm going to make it grow like just 20% by saying 1.2. So let's go back and then into the next and previous. I'm going to set the previous scale. I want it to be just slightly smaller by 20%. I'm going to set the next scale to be also smaller. So we have this previous and next 20% smaller. I'm going to go back here and go into carousel, and then I'm going to select no grouping. Grouping means that if the grouping is 3, it's going to select 3 of them at once and apply this active style to the 3 of them. So we don't want any grouping. We just want them to be 1 by 1. Let's go to the behavior and interaction. The only thing we're going to change here is that we're going to enable wraparound. Go out there, and then we're going to navigation arrow. I'm going to change the icon size to 28, And then inside colors, I want the background to be transparent. I want my hover color to be red, and my icon color, I want it to be gray, something dark like this. Let's go here and just bring that in a little bit. Let's go back and go into the page dots. For the page dot, because we're already using this carousel as the dots, we're going to disable the page dot. And then I'm going to go out and go to, this is the most important part. This part is going to enable the syncing. I'm going to enable this too. So this says use as navigation for another carousel, and then this says sync carousel. So what this means is that you're using this as a navigation, but this means that they should sync. They should be in sync. When the other one moves, this should move also. And the value that this takes is the ID of the carousel that you want to sync with and that you want to use as a navigator for, which is this top one. So I'm going to copy this ID, come back here, go to syncing, and remember to put the hash, and I'm going to paste that, and I'm also going to paste this here. So now that is the setup that we need for this carousel to be linked to this one. So we're going to start adding things. So I'm just going to drop in a repeater inside there, and for the repeater we're going to do the same thing. Go to custom post type. We need a custom product, and the filtering will have to be the same. So whatever you used for this repeater, you're going to use it for this, for the second one. So we had the category 1, so you have to basically use the same query for this. Now it can be difficult to get, you know, a sense of what is really going on here, but you can see that it's already separating it into cells based on the number of post types that is going to be populated here. So I'm going to go in to that carousel, the size and spacing, and then I want to give it padding top of 2 rem, and of course I want the bottom to be 2 rem, and then the left and right I want it to be 4 rem. So that is going to give a nice padding around it. And the width, I want the width to be 80% because I don't want it to stretch too much. You can see it doesn't stretch all the way to the end here. One of the reasons you want to make it not stretch too much is because when you set this to display a certain number of cells, if it is too large, you're going to have empty spaces, and you see the cells are going to be disappearing and appearing. So you need the width to be small enough to accommodate the number of cells that are displaying per time. So that is why I set it to 80%. Let's be sure that this was set to center. Okay, yeah, it was set to center. So that means that we're going to have both of our carousel properly centered, even though it doesn't look so here in the builder. But then I would like to go into that, select that repeater again, and then I will set the left margin to auto, so this centralizes this element. I'm going to go ahead and select the repeater div, and then I'm going to add a class to it. That repeater div is what will be used for the main cells. So I'm going to add a class of sync dot is going to be the dot image wrapper. I'm going to add my prefix too. I want to stack it horizontal, and then I want to set it to middle and center. I want to give it a background of white, and then I want to give it a margin top and bottom of 2 rem. So let's go to there, 2 rem, 2 rem. Mostly because when it grows like that, you know, you don't want it to be cut off. Let's go to the border and give it a border radius of 20 pixels. Then I'm going to add an image inside that div, and that image is going to have a URL. From image URL is going to have a data of advanced custom field image. The size I would like it to be, since it's going to be a small image, I want it to be medium size. Let me quickly check if we had set a space between cells. Alright, so I'm going to add that 20 so we have some nice spacing between our cells. But in keeping with our, let's just make it in rems. Now let's go back to that image. So I'm going to give that image a class, sync.image -2. And with that class selected, I'm going to give it a width. I need that image to be just not too big, so a width of 130 pixel and a height of auto. And I'm going to save that and refresh the front end. Okay, so we have this, so let's see. You can see that works nicely. Even though we gave it selected a background color of red, it's just not going to work because this is not a transparent background, so it's not going to work. So what we'll need to do is just to add a custom CSS. So that custom CSS will be on this image wrapper. So I'm just going to give it a name of image wrapper so I would remember. But it's not going to be written here. I'm going to go in here. Now the class is image wrapper 2. Yep. I'm going to go in there. I have a CSS already. I'm going to just paste it there. And this is wrapper 2. So this gives it a border, solid 5-pixel red border. So let me collapse that. Let's go to the front end and see. It's not showing up here because it's not previewing. So you can see that we have that. Now this is wrong. Something is wrong here. So I'm going to go back to that carousel. That is not supposed to be red. I'm going to go back to that carousel. Navigation arrows, colors, hover background. I put red. It's not supposed to be. It should be hover icon. So it should be the icon color, not the background color. So let's refresh that. And yep. So you see that is working. Now, so what is left here is just to take care of responsive settings. Now for the responsive setting, I'm going to start with the tabs wrapper. I'm going to start with the tablet mode. This is the tablet, this is the phone landscape, and this is the phone portrait. So I'm going to start with the tablet for that. And then I'm going to stack child element vertically. So I'm going to stack vertically, center, middle. That brings this here to the top. And then I'm going to select the tabs parents. And then I'm going to lay out child element horizontally. Now, that may not make sense yet because we don't have more tabs, but if I duplicate this, you can see that it lays them horizontally. And then I'm going to give it a gap of 2 rem. So you see that gap there? And margin left and right, I'm going to set it to auto. I want it to be perfectly centered. Then a margin bottom, I'm going to give it a margin bottom of 3 rem. And that's just going to lift it away from this a bit. And I will take off. Now there is a box shadow that we have added in the beginning, so I'm going to take that off at the mobile breakpoint. There's really no way to just say disable here, so what I'm going to do is to set it to transparent and set all these values to 0. And then I'm going to go to the overflow. We had set it to hidden before. I'm going to set the overflow to visible. Now, because of what we're going to do next. So I'm going to select the tab class, and then I'm going to change the horizontal item alignment to center. Let me quickly select this category because we don't want it. This category wrapper, I'm just going to set it to none. Normally, I would set this to display like that, but it's really not necessary because anyway, I'm going to set this to, this is going to be absolutely positioned. So let's just continue. I'm going to go in and give it a padding of 2 rem for all of them. And then I'm going to go into custom CSS here and give it an aspect ratio because I want it to be square of 1. And then I'm going to go in here and give it a minimum width of 0. Now that ensures that no matter what, Oxygen doesn't force that 80% stuff. This is supposed to be square. I'm not quite sure why it is not. Let's go back and check that. Aspect ratio is 1. What if I said 1/2 just to check whether it's working? Okay, it's working. So yeah, I think that's going to fall in place. What I'm going to do is to set this to, position relative. I'm going to give it a border of white. Now the reason I'm giving a border of white is because the active class is going to also need a border. So if we go in here, the active class has a border. So you don't want to transition from no border to border. You always want it to have a border initially. If there's no border, it's going to jerk. There's going to be some jerking effect there. So I'm going to go to the borders and then I'm going to give it a border of solid white and 2 pixels. Something is actually wrong with this with Oxygen in Oxygen 4. This particular installation. So I think I'm just gonna check that out. So we have the top. I need to set that to each of them individually. This is crazy. If I don't set it to each of them individually, it's not working. So that is a bug that probably will be sorted out in the most recent release, which I've not updated yet. This 4.0.2. 4.0.3 beta is out, so maybe they have addressed that. I'm going to go ahead and give it a border radius of 100%. I need it to be round. And for this icon, let me change this name to category icon. And then I'm going to change this name to arrow. For the arrow icon, I want to set it to display absolute. I'm going to set the top to 100%, so it pushes it down 100% the parent's width or the parent's height. And I'm going to set a z index of 10 to it. I want it to ensure that it's always at the top. And then I'm going to go into effect transform. I'm going to set the translate y to -50%. So it keeps it just at the middle here. Then while we are still working with the tab, I just want to finish that tab. So I'm going to go into the landscape mode with the tab class selected. I'm going to give it 1 rem padding, and then the tab icon, I'm going to select it and give it a size of 45 pixels. My padding doesn't appear to be doing anything. Okay, so I have to choose rem. Yep. Okay. Then I'm going to go all the way down to the phone, and the tab icon, I think I'm going to take that down to 24 pixels. And then for the arrow, I'm going to change the icon padding to 7. Now let's go back to that. We need to set a tab active class. So I'm going to go to the tab active, and then I'm going to go to borders. I'm going to give it solid blue, and I'm going to give it 2. So you can see it applies only to the top. So I have to go here. I see the top is applied, so I will do that. So the rest of them, which, like I said, is a serious annoying bug. Hopefully it's resolved. So that okay, so we're done with that. So we're going to start responsive settings for the tab content. So we're back at the tablet size, and the wrap inside the tab, the sync slider wrap inside there. I'm going to select the thumbnail carousel at this breakpoint, and then I'm going to set the cells to display. Number of visible cells, I'm going to set it to 4. So apply that param. And go back there. I'm going to select the navigation arrows, and the arrow size I will set it to 24 this time around. Then I'm going to go to the phone landscape, and I'm going to select this slider wrap. So I want to separate these carousels at the smaller breakpoint. I just want to drop it a little bit away from each other because they could get really close. So I'm going to give it a gap of 2 rem. And then for the padding, I just need more room. So I'm going to go to here, the left top and right, I'm just going to give it 0. So we need enough room. So we already have paddings on the sections. So we want to reduce the paddings there on this wrapper. I'm going to go to the main carousel and go to the cell. At this breakpoint, we want to set the height to auto. So we don't want that height to be 600 like we said initially. And then for the thumbnail carousel, I'm just going to go into the navigation arrow again and reduce it further to 18 pixels. Just want it to be smaller. Then for the phone portrait, for the thumbnail carousel, I'm further going to reduce the cell to 3. So number of visible cells is going to be 3. And then I'm going to set the space between cells to 1 rem. Then I'm going to go to the navigation arrows, position and spacing. I'm going to set this, the previous left. I want it to shift apart. So I'm going to set it to -10 pixel. And then for this one, the right, I'm going to set it to -10 pixels. So it just moves apart away from the thumbnails. Now let's save this and see what happens at the front end. So this looks good. We haven't linked this yet, so we still have this. So let's take a look at that. Now please ignore this. We're going to take care of that later. So we have this. Now there are other things we're still supposed to do. Okay, so you see it's the responsiveness kicks in, but we still have to do something here. So these other ones, they look okay. So what we're going to do is to take care of this section here. So we're going to select the main carousel, and I'm going to open this content container. We'll go in. Once we're here, I want to stack this vertically. So we have some margins that we're going to reset here. I'm going to go into the image wrap, and I'm going to reset these margins. So this was -12. I'm taking that back to 0, and this was, I'm taking that back to 0 also. Now it looks a bit shorter here. I'm going to set the aspect ratio here to 1.5, so it's just a little bit tall, and just to make sure it's centered, I'm going to align self to center just to make sure that it's properly centered. Now I need this box shadow to be smaller, so I'm going to go to Effect, Box Shadow, and I just want to set this to -5. This will be 13. Set this to 14, and then I'm going to set this to 15. And I'm going to set the color, so I have a subtle smaller drop shadow. And just to be sure it remains on top, I'm just going to give it a Z index of 5. I'm going to go to the phone landscape, and then I'm going to give it a minimum height of minimum width. Let me set that to 170, and then a minimum height of 350. So let's just make it a little bit taller, and then I'm going to change the aspect ratio again at here to 1.3, so it's not too narrow. So I'm going to select the content wrap, and let's go back to the landscape. In the landscape mode, I would set that from a width of 70% to 100%. Let's make sure you select that value. So we have a width of 100% there. That makes this looks a bit smaller. So I'm going to select the image wrap, go in again, and set the minimum width to 200, and just make it 280 pixels. So it's it might not show here, but it definitely is going to show on the front end. Let's go back to our tab content. Let's go to the phone landscape, go into the size and spacing. Then I'm going to give it a height of auto. That is going to bring everything like that back in place. This looks, some things are not going on well here, so let's resolve that. At this size, in order to be able to control how much the background touches the edge of this div, I'm going to give it a maximum width of, let's say, 550 pixels. So depending on the device you're viewing, it shouldn't go bigger at this breakpoint. It shouldn't go bigger than 550. And I'm going to give it a minimum height of 450. That means it should not be smaller than 450 pixels. Let's save this and preview. I want to know why we have a lot of space here. So I'm going to refresh this. Okay. Now for the content wrap, we want to pull it in a little bit. You can see that it's pulled in a little bit here. So to do that, we're going to give it a negative margin, 7 rem. Then for our paddings, we will need to adjust those paddings. For the top, we're going to give it 3 rem. And then for this, we're going to give it 8 rem. So we're no longer using percentage for that. Now it really doesn't help that we can't see the way it looks here. So what I will do is, let's go back here, and I think this 280 was a bit too much. I'm going to save this and check the front end and see how it looks again. This doesn't look bad. Let's see. So at this breakpoint, I think we might need to make adjustments. We're going to make more adjustments. Let's start by reducing the font sizes of this. So here, at this breakpoint, I think I would like to reduce the font size to 2.2 rem. Now I'm not using responsive typography here, so I'm just reducing the font size per. So here we can take it back to say 2.4 rem, and at this point we can make it, let's say, 1.8 rem, and here we could make it, let's say, 1.4 rem. Let's see that. So let's save it and preview on the front end. Okay, so things are looking they're looking well. This looks really small here, so we would check that. Now at the much lower breakpoint, we are going to take out these and replace this background. So at the phone landscape, we are taking this out. We taking that out from the original design that is not there, and then when we get to this point, we are going to hide this image, and then we're going to add a background to this content wrap. So let me add a background to it. This is going to be the background for the responsive. I'm going to set it to cover 50%, no repeat, 50%. So that is going to be, sorry, it's going to be content. So that's going to be a background for the mobile. You can see page, you have that different background for the mobile device. So at this breakpoint, the padding here is a bit much, and so we're going to go back in and take it down to 3 rem. So that this image, this is not aligned to the right, so right from this point, I'm going to just take it and align it to the left like that. Yes, and I think we have too much space here, so I think from this breakpoint, I think I would like to take it down to from 2.4 to 1.8 rem, maybe 1.4. Preview. This still feels a bit big, so I'm just going to make it 1 rem. Let me save that and refresh the front end and see how it looks. Now at this point, I would like to refresh the builder so I can see what is going on here. I'm going to go ahead and refresh the builder. Let's see if we're going to have the proper representation of what we're doing so far. Sometimes the builder gets like that. Okay, let's check the smaller breakpoints. Yeah, I think it looks better than it was before. If I select that, doesn't really show as good as the front end. Now, one of the things, the problem we're having here is that this is getting really tiny at this smaller breakpoint. So let's see what the issue is. So at this breakpoint, I'm going to select the image. We had our width to be 130. I'm just going to reduce it to 80 here, and at these breakpoints, I'm going to reduce it to 60. Then the image wrap, I'll go to this breakpoint and change this to 0.5 rem, and this to 0.5 rem. And now this is reducing so fast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that image wrapper. Where is the class for that? Anyway, I'm just going to set minimum width fit content, and that should I think that should resolve the issue we are having. So let me select that and then go to there and set a minimum width. All right, fit contents. Let's save it and see the result we are going to get. Okay, let's reduce it. So as you can see, it doesn't go bad and as bad as it was. So I'm going to preview like in the phone mode and refresh. So you see that works, and then I'm going to go into the phone mode. Of course, it doesn't automatically readjust when you change, so you have to refresh here to see. So for here, we might need to do something to this padding. Now with this repeater selected, because at the lower breakpoints, as you can see, we have very limited space here. The large padding here, I'm going to reset this, and then at this breakpoint, I think this should be okay. Let's just see how that looks. I'm going to refresh that. All right, I think that looks good. So we can see the three thumbnails are showing. So let's clean this up. So this doesn't look good because this is not properly aligned. So from the start, I'm going to select that slogan. I'm going to select that and set the typography to be left. And let's look at that. Okay, so that looks good. Yes, we don't have anything there. So this looks good here. Let's check the other breakpoints, bigger phones. How about the iPad mini? Let's refresh that. So yeah, we have that. And how about the iPad Pro? Sorry, the iPad Pro. Let's refresh that. So that looks well. If we change the orientation, of course, like I said, at least on the browser, you need to refresh it to see how it displays. So I'm not going to waste time with this one here. I'm just going to paste some CSS that I applied multiple media queries to, just make sure that it stays on place. This is actually based on an actual design that was provided. So yeah, it has to be done. So I'm just going to go to the CSS and paste that media query. That should be before the slider starts. Our selector is different, so I'm going to change my selector. This should be 2. Let's refresh. Okay, so it sits. So the last bit of this will be to put them in separate tabs. This is one of the most important part. Let me collapse this. I've already duplicated these tabs. What you're going to do is we will need to have the tab items duplicated also. So I'm just going to carry this and just duplicate it twice. Now we have that. Now let's just take a look and see what happens. So I'm refreshing that. You see, if I go here, these sliders don't display properly, and of course it's not synced. So the first thing we're going to do is to sync it. So we're going to go into for each of the tab, the slider wrap, and then we take the ID of this, copy it, and go to the sync setting of the next slider and replace that ID with what is there. And then we do that to the next tab, content. Take the ID of this and then go in here and replace it with this. Let's save that and see if it's going to sync. Okay, so it's syncing, but it's not displaying properly. So let's see, how can we solve that? Now what happens is that these tab contents, these two are hidden. So on page load, so it's kind of difficult for the script to initialize properly, and that's probably why you're having this issue. So what we're going to do is to override that hidden class and use another CSS to make sure that the tab content are not hidden, but we find a way to hide it using opacity. And I'm going to add a CSS that is going to take care of that. I'm not going to write out a CSS, I'm just going to copy and paste that CSS. So, and I'll provide it. So I'm pasting that CSS. What it actually does is it's still from one of my tutorials where it hides, it takes the tab content hidden and displayed flex, change the opacity, makes everything work, and provides on that sliding animation. And so you can see now that it's working because on page load the tab contents are not hidden, so it helps in this to work even though they are inside tabs. If I go to responsive mode, let me go to the iPhone, refresh this, so you can see that this works. If I go to the next tab content, this works. If I go to the next tab content, actually these arrows are supposed to face down, and I'm going to go into effect, transform, and then I'm going to rotate. I'm going to rotate it 90. So yep, so if I refresh that, yep, so it's facing down and everything works as it should. The iPad Pro works, and flip it here, refresh, should work. Okay, so that basically brings an end to the tutorial. I'm not quite sure if there's something else I've left out, but everything seems to be okay. So the one last thing is, once you're done with that, you have to now go in. So let's say we had this, maybe this was supposed to be category 2 and this was supposed to be category 3. Like I said, the tabs are static, and you go in and make sure that you have your query in the repeater set. So for this one, my query in the repeater, I'm going to change this query to the filtering. I'm going to change it to category 2 and 3, and then delete category 1. And then I'm going to go into its thumbnail carousel and do the same to the repeater inside it. So they have to have the same query. So category 2 and 3. And then I'm going to move to this one. So go to here, go to the query, the filtering. I'm going to give it category 3 and 4. I'm deleting 1. And yeah, the same here. Query filtering, category 3 and 4. I explained earlier the reason I'm applying multiple categories is because I need more products to be populated. Normally they're supposed to have just one categories, but I didn't have enough products to populate that. So you can see that the categories are populated, the queries are different. I hope you like this tutorial, and if you do, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. Check out this next tutorial. I believe you are going to like it. Have a great day. Bye.